Hello and welcome to the Teach Starter webinar series. My name's Bron and today I'm joined by Tramain, who's also known as the Murray Teacher on Instagram, and Caitlyn, who is tea and country teaching on Instagram. And today we're going to be talking about embedding First Nations perspectives into our classrooms, and then we're also going to be talking a little bit more about reconciliation education as well. So welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It is so good to chat to you both, and we all feel that it's really important to have these discussions and continue to focus together on bringing histories, perspectives and cultures into our classrooms of First Nations Australians. Why do you think right now it's super important for us to be really conscious of how we teach and integrate learning about our First Nations people in our classrooms? Do you want to go first, Tramain?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think at the moment, Australia as a whole there is positive change happening, and I think the generation that's coming through, they're more knowledgeable and they are hearing more perspectives than ever, but they're also coming to us at a very young age where their mind can still be shaped in a way that is positive, even if their home life isn't. So I think the way that teachers in general word their perspectives without bias could make a big difference in the next generation of kids. So I'm hoping that teachers are coming into things without bias and with the want for that change to keep happening. So.
Absolutely, right. That's great. What a great answer. And to you, Caitlyn.
Yeah, I think in today's day and age, like we have such quick access to information that in my opinion, there's really no excuse to be informed about things that are going on in our world. And so the lines that maybe we could have said in the past about, I didn't know about that, or I was never taught that in school, it doesn't really apply anymore. Like the information is there for us and for us to bring to our students. So just because we didn't know about it when we were at school, or maybe school wasn't taught the same way that it is currently, is even more of a reason to bring it to the forefront now.
Absolutely. So well said from both of you. Thank you for sharing. So just to give some context about why we all feel this way as well, across the Australian curriculum, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Histories and Cultures Priority, which is one of the cross-curriculum priorities, provides opportunities for all learners to deepen their knowledge of Australia by engaging in reconciliation, respect and recognition of the world's oldest continuous living cultures. Now, as teachers, we understand our responsibility to embed teaching and learning about First Nations cultures across all of the learning areas and to really integrate that into everything we do in our classroom. And today, you beautiful guests who we've got here, thank you so much for coming and sharing and having this discussion, because you are going to take us through some ways that teachers can help their students make connections to people, culture and country, and to expand the breadth of their learning to focus on histories and perspectives of First Nations Australians. And also how we can use these learnings as foundations for helping to move as a country together towards reconciliation. So we're going to pop a little link in the comments here for our viewers, just pointing you towards the ACARA cross-curriculum priority, so you can take a look at that at your leisure as well. But I'm sure many, many people are already very familiar with that, because it is, as I said, part of that document, and a very important one at that. So I thought maybe we could just start by talking about if we could just get to know you both a little bit and to find out about your background and your history as an educator and where you're coming from to your students every day, and what you're all about, basically. So Caitlyn, can you tell us a bit about your background as an educator, but also just as you as a person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is my sixth year of teaching actually, and I have taught in a small country school and now in quite a large Melbourne suburb school. So having kind of a range of experience with teaching of age levels, socioeconomic status, cultural status. My current teaching context is in a very multicultural school in a growth area on the suburbs of Melbourne. So that I find that has really sparked my passion for incorporating culture in the classroom, because there are just so many cultures that my students bring in with them every day. And so that's been able to really help us to share similarities and differences between their cultures, between Aboriginal cultures, Torres Strait Islander cultures. It's been a really great kind of base point for us. I teach Year 4. This is my third year teaching Year 4 at this school, and I've been able to really grow in my own journey as a teacher when considering these perspectives. Mostly starting from last year, I was always interested in learning about Aboriginal history. I studied some subjects in university and was always kind of passionate about it, but never really knew how to bring it into my teaching. I knew that I had to. I knew that, I could do little things on Sorry Day or Reconciliation Week, but going further than that, I always really struggled. And then last year I did a PD with Australians Together, and just really felt after that, some of those barriers that we'll talk about a bit later were really torn down for me, and I felt really confident in just starting somewhere, and from there it quickly grew into quite a passion of mine in our classroom and in my teaching team.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And to Tramain, where have you come from? How did you begin as a teacher, and where do you teach now?
All right, so I am in my second year of teaching. I teach grade 2. I have 23 kids, all of which identify as First Nations, so Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and both. I am an Aboriginal woman myself, of course, so I'm a Bundjalung woman, and I've grown up and lived my whole life on Yagara country from the western suburbs of Brisbane. I went to an Indigenous school myself, so we were the first year of graduates from Himbayumba in the western suburbs, and I think from that school I realised that until that moment I was at that school I'd never seen an Aboriginal teacher before, and I didn't realise that is something that I could be. So when I left uni, my main goal was to work in an Indigenous school, and I do now, and it's just the best. Like, I get to work with other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander teachers every day, and get to bounce a lot of my learning off them and expand on my knowledge every day of different countries around Australia, and it's just the best. It's just
that is awesome. It sounds like you're living the dream.
Yeah, so it was exactly, I think I'm the teacher that I needed as a little person, so
beautiful.
It's awesome for my kids and it's awesome for me. So
oh, that's so lovely, Tramain. And I think we've all, we all bring our own experiences into education and have these gorgeous reasons why we became educators ourselves, and it's really great to see that you are both inspiring the next generation of children to have passion for education and learning, and also giving them visibility, because like you said, you didn't have that so much when you were really, really young. Yeah. Okay, so I guess where a lot of teachers might struggle with their integration about learning First Nations perspectives, delivering information and sharing with their students. As you said, Caitlyn, you have a bit of experience with not knowing where to start. So from your lived experience and what you've learned in the last several years, what is the first step that teachers can take to start to effectively integrate First Nations cultures into their classrooms, if they're not already?
Yeah, I think for me, the understanding that it is my responsibility as a teacher and educator, but it's also my responsibility as an Australian, particularly as an Australian who doesn't identify as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. The responsibility lies with me because it doesn't lie with First Nations people. And I think that's been said quite openly on a number of platforms in the lead up to Reconciliation Week, that it's our responsibility to educate ourselves with the information that is out there, and it's then our responsibility to share that as educators with our students. I think as well, the understanding that I do not know everything, and I have wrong ideas, and my bias is evidently present in my ideas. So it's a continual journey for me of recognizing that bias and perspective. Some of it has come from my own cultural heritage, some of it has come from my education as an Australian child, recognizing the, I suppose, discrepancy in that, and then taking chances to improve and change those things. So sometimes it's not about the first step being you as a teacher, but actually you as a person. Once you kind of reconcile that within yourself and you understand where you're standing at the moment, whose land it is, and the history and the tragedy behind that, I found that I couldn't stop myself from learning more and bringing it to the classroom, because as a human, as a woman, as a friend, all of those things push me to try and incorporate that as much as I can, because it simply shouldn't just go unsaid. So I think it's coming to that realization as a person first of all, and then taking it into your teaching.
Yeah, fantastic. And congratulations on that journey, and for enacting that change for yourself as well, because I think that's something that we can all really take on board. And as you said, it is our responsibility. It should be our own personal priority. And just think that is a great first step. So thank you for sharing that. Tramain, what do you think is the first step?
So my first steps I took was when I got into my school, I looked at our unit plans and I looked at the timetable that were already existing, and I completely redesigned it. I just wanted to take out this kind of integration that was there just here and there, because I found that First Nations perspectives in the pre-existing unit plan were just done for the sake of being done. And I think in particular in my context, that wasn't good enough, but in any context, that's not good enough. So I started to put it into every single day in my classroom and every aspect of the kids' lives while they were in my classroom. I looked at the Australian curriculum and thought to myself, how can we move past this clear line of this is culture and this is our Western education system, and make them more on par with each other and more intertwined? So that's specific to my particular situation. But it's more, for me, making sure that culture is in everything, not just like something that we do as an extracurricular activity. So, I just wanted to make them a clear joint thing. So a lot of our families have this perspective that school is something separate to what they do in their lives, but I wanted the kids to be learning just as much about culture at school as they are at home. Like they're the same. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And you're right, it is all about learning, and the value in the learning is just as great in either of those contexts. Yeah. But I find it really interesting that you talk about that clear line that was so clear to you between Western ideals of teaching and learning, and then also cultural teaching and learning. And so how did you begin to break down that line? Can you give us an example of a curriculum area that you were able to actually really embed and get right into there and demonstrate, I guess, the learnings or the essential knowledge and skills with a cultural impact as well?
Yeah, so we did, as an example, last semester, we looked at, for our integrated science and history unit, the theme of community. And I am no way a master of my community and the kids' community. So instead of me standing up there and acting like I was the person who knew everything, I had an elder come in, and I often have elders come into my classroom, and he spoke to the kids about the Aboriginal community in Brisbane and how important it was. So I think I always say this when people ask, the most important thing you can do to integrate Aboriginal perspectives into your classroom is to have elders and community members come in, because their wealth of knowledge is so beyond what even I, as someone who's always lived here as a member of the community, could know. Like it's that they just have so much knowledge on so many things that you wouldn't expect. If we're looking at maths, they can tell you, like the elders from this area, they can tell you the existing seasons that were here before white Australia's concepts of a season came in, and the way that the fishing was and when you could fish at certain times. It's moving past that rigidness of what the curriculum is and delving into being specific to the area. And I think a lot of the time that makes a lot of sense to the kids that live in that area, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, because they're like, oh yeah, like I do know that you can fish better at that time, or I do know that those flowers start to bloom at that time, and it's relevant to them as somebody from that community, not some like northern hemisphere season.
Like it's snowing at Christmas time or whatever.
Which makes no sense.
Contextualising it, I think, is really important. And we know as teachers that we have to bring children's prior knowledge and skills and understanding into our classroom. And it seems like whether you're teaching First Nations children or other children, it is really important to value their communities and their backgrounds when they turn up at school. We were talking a little bit before, Caitlyn, about little preps that turn up and they're in their first year of school, and how sometimes they don't understand the, I guess, conventions of traditional schooling when they turn up. And this is all like 4-year-olds. They're a whole different thing, but like it really reminds me that we have to value the knowledge that they do have and the things that they do carry close to them too. Did you have anything you wanted to add there, Caitlyn?
Just that even looking from a historical perspective, every concept that we cover in the curriculum has historical roots somewhere in the world, and so often you can bring that right back to historical places and things that people did in Australia before colonisation. So when you're talking about things, we're doing a unit of work, an inquiry unit on time at the moment. And time has not always existed how it exists now. It has not always been minutes, hours, seconds, 12 months. And so it's so easy when you think about that in a historical context. Well, how did Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders used to measure time? How did they know seasons? How did they know nighttime from daytime? How did they, measure time and measure events and the time between events? So everything has a historical concept to it. And it's, if you can make those connections, then something abstract like time, where you think, well, I could never figure out how to connect time with Aboriginal perspectives. Well, yes, you can, because everyone at some point in history has measured time in a different way. So it's about breaking down some of those blocks of curriculum content and making them more transdisciplinary to begin with, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. That's some really great examples that you've both given. And I think that you were saying before that you're on a continuum of learning yourself, Caitlyn, but I think that also for the students, it's that inquiry and that love of learning and asking the questions like, well, how did the Aboriginal people tell time? Or, it's just really great to see their minds ticking over once they're in that pattern of questioning and inquiry. Yeah, so that's really great. Thank you both for those really insightful answers that you gave. Okay, so thinking about breaking down, speaking of time, on a daily basis, what are some practices that you undertake in your classroom with your students to connect with people, country and culture? I'm just thinking about some of the things that we do routinely to make sure that we are really, making part of our day, making all of our day really, but what are some of those daily things that you guys are doing in your classrooms to help this happen?
Yeah, I think for us, it's definitely been a journey this year of how to incorporate it daily. It's not been something that we've done prior to this year. There's been a lot of change around our understanding of acknowledgements of country. When we say those, what do they mean? Writing our own. At the moment, one of the things that we're talking about in my team during planning is we use the idea of a campfire space, a circle time for whole group sharing. So, linking that back to culture and thinking about, well, how is this being used over time, and what's the significance of a circle in, what meaning does the shape of a circle have in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture? That's been a really interesting kind of track for us to inquire into, and then hopefully bring that in when the kids are back at school with us. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Tramain, because you're in like a slightly, well, it's not unique because there are more than one, but it's an interesting school context. What are you doing daily? I'm sure there are many things, like your whole day.
So like Caitlyn, we start each day with a yarning circle. At the very beginning of the year, I speak to the kids about the cultural significance of circle and the rules while we're in circle. I explain to the kids that Miss Tramain didn't make these rules up. These rules have existed for as long as our culture has existed, so we must respect them. And it's making sure that kids feel comfortable to be able to share, but knowing that only one person can share at a time. We don't talk over each other. Miss Tramain is equal with you in the circle. I'm not your teacher. I'm somebody that's sharing in the circle as well. We open that yarning circle with acknowledgement every day. So the kids and I designed this together at the start of the year, and we are very comfortable. The kids are very comfortable with that. We acknowledge that even though we are Murray's Aboriginal people from Queensland, that we don't come from this area. There's no kid in my class that's actually a Yagara person. So we acknowledge that even though we are Murrays, this is somebody else's country, and we have to respect that, and that there were laws and protocols here long before we were, and we need to respect that as even Murray people. So we also have elders in and around our school all the time, and I always take the opportunity to have them in my room. I think they're just so valuable. There's no wasted time with an elder, and I never give them specific topics to talk about. I really want them to have authentic conversations with the kids. Even if they ask me, what do you want me to talk about today? I always just say, whatever you want to talk about and whatever the kids want to ask you about, I want that to be from them and directed from them. I don't want to interfere with that. And it doesn't have to be within the boundaries of the curriculum. Like, there's so many life lessons that you can learn from an elder that I sit down and cross my legs and listen to as well, because I'm still obviously learning. This year our school has adopted a Torres Strait Islander language. So I'm going to butcher this and my teacher at school is going to die. Kalu Kawaya, which is KKY. It's from the western islands of the Torres Strait, and she's from an island called Sabai, and she teaches that to my kids, and we're so lucky to have her on staff. She's our prep teacher, actually.
Oh,
so,
lovely.
She's very patient.
Yeah.
So she teaches the kids language once a week, but I then also use those words with the kids all the time. So they greet in language, they say thank you to their specialist teachers in language, we play Simon Says in language, if we've got a spare couple of minutes we'll sing in language, and it's just amazing how quickly these kids pick this up, and it's going to be a part of their life for a long time. Like, they pick it up faster than I do, they are more confident using the language than I am, and it's going full circle. We try to incorporate Torres Strait Islander perspectives as much as we do Aboriginal perspectives, because a lot of our kids are both. So It's really important to us. But it's amazing to just hear a First Nations language thriving. So not just surviving, but knowing that these kids are going to carry that on. So
yeah, that is amazing. And knowing that some First Nations languages have, unfortunately and really sadly, died. It is so important for us to treasure that knowledge and have it passed down, like you said, between a teacher and students, and also between colleagues. So that's really great that you have that, and they sound like some really engaging and interesting and valuable practices that you've got going on in your classrooms. I just thought we might talk a little bit about the concept of a yarning circle, because I'm really interested in this myself, and I'm thinking maybe some teachers might like to start this in their own classrooms. My children went to a kindy where they had a yarning circle every morning, and it became really important to them personally. So I thought maybe you guys could give us a few pointers, or if you know of any resources. We'll also pop some stuff in the comments for teachers to look at here too, about yarning circles and their like you've already sort of spoken to their value, but also just how to establish this kind of practice in your room.
Yep. So in our room, we start every morning with it. We hop in circle, we all sit equally, so there's not levels in a circle. I don't sit on my chair. If I don't have time to sit on the floor for them, they run it themselves. I never want to be kind of above them in the circle.
And you've got grade 2s, haven't
Grade
you?
2s,
Yep, so that might not work with kindies running it
No.
themselves, but, you know, maybe.
Yeah, no, not with kindies. Do not let the kindies run it themselves. And they've had my year 2s have had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Like, this is only a recent
Yeah.
establishment. I would never have let them do this at the start of the year. And I don't interrupt if I'm not in circle. Like, they know that that is kind of a sacred circle, and I'm not part of it if I'm not in circle. We do acknowledgement, and then they check in. So they each go around and do a little, they can do thumbs up, thumbs down, or they can do a zones of self-regulation check-in. A lot of them give a little spiel about their morning. Some of them go on for a long time and we have to get a move on. But then after they've done their check-in, we then talk about what's happening throughout the day. So it's just giving them each the time to talk and share if they need to share. But it's also something that I haven't yet done, but you can do again at the end of the day as a what went well in our day today. But I'm hoping that I can start to integrate that more.
Yeah. And it seems like something that would be so easily integrated into a classroom because a lot of teachers in Western education systems have a morning meeting, or, you know, like they do days of the week and do the seasons and things like that. And as you said before, Caitlyn, that's a great opportunity to talk about country and talk about the environment and what's happening around us. I guess, would that be something appropriate to bring into that time as well?
So I do talk about what's going on in those circles. I know that in my school, this is still a new concept. I did it in the school that I attended as a high schooler, but my specific context there, teachers are still even a little bit unsure of how they can do it in their own rooms. So I always encourage it, even if you mess it up. Like, it's something that you're going to learn to do over time. It's not going to be perfect the first time. The first time the kids will all be talking over each other and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is not working. But they'll learn. Yeah. And you'll learn and you'll fix things and change things as time goes on.
And we are reflective as practitioners as well. And like you said, like the end of day reflection is very much a norm in many classrooms anyway. So it would be really great to do that. Caitlyn, what benefits do you find from your yarning circle, and how do you operate that in your room?
We use the space of a circle for a range of different things. Sometimes it's a start of the day check-in, particularly after a weekend or a school holidays, just as like a space just to gather together and to share. We've also used the circle spaces. We haven't yet introduced the term yarning circle. That has just been a fairly new thing for us to think about. But to resolve issues, to talk about problems in the classroom and come up with shared solutions, to celebrate each other's achievements, to praise each other. We do like shout outs, and they go around the circle and share something that they've noticed someone else in their class doing really well. Anything works in a circle, because I guess our agreement, which we made at the beginning of the year in my class, was that the circle is a safe and shared space where everyone is equal. So having that shared understanding with the kids, and it is probably a little bit easier for them to get their head around in year 4 maybe than in kindy, but I think everyone appreciates the feeling of sitting in a circle with everyone facing one another. It's got a very calming feel, it's got a very open feel, and anything from praising each other and celebrating success to restoring hurt relationships or issues within the classroom or the playground. It's just so flexible to so many things that we already do in the classroom, but instead of it being me at the front kind of talking to them about that, it's a shared conversation together on the floor.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to teach kids about communication and respect in such a way that is open and recognises the values that everybody has might differ from one another. Their ideas might differ and result in little conflicts and things. But I think that that's a really lovely way to kind of ground your kids and get them to have form those really great relationships. So I was going to look now towards the concept of reconciliation education. There's an amazing website called Narangala. I'm gonna butcher this one. There's an amazing website called Narangala, and I've used it as a teacher numerous times and working here at Teach Starter as well. But it's a really great place to start for teachers when exploring reconciliation with their students. And you just mentioned something that made me really feel like this is a great introduction to this section of the webinar, which is healing past hurts and relationships, Caitlyn. So how do you start to broach the conversation about reconciliation with your students, and how do you have that conversation ongoing in your classroom?
Yeah, so we practice restorative practices at our school, which is essentially instead of, when an issue arises between people, instead of just kind of reprimanding or handing out a punishment or something like that, you actually have a conversation that restores the relationship and seeks to mend that hurt. And so the connection from that into the wound of hurt from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders across many, many generations. And this is a really important part we talked about the other day, is that the stolen generations isn't one generation of people. It's got a multi-generational effect. So the connection between those two for our kids was really easy for them to kind of understand. And I think kids are so empathetic, and when they hear stories of other people being hurt, even whether it's in the detail that we might talk about in the upper primary years, or whether it's in just the really simple phrasing of things were done that hurt a specific group of people that was not fair and that's continued for many, many years. The kids get that. They are instinctively empathetic towards those situations. So the idea of reconciliation, I find, is actually easier to have kids understand than adults. There's a lot of prejudgment when you're talking about adults with it. There's a lot of bias. There's a lot of perspective, but kids are naturally open and wanting to understand how to make things better for people. The emotions are often a really good place as well to start thinking about, well, what can we do now? Like, it's, it happened before your time, it happened before my time, what can we actually do? And their emotions that they're feeling are really real, and they're valid emotions. And so to get that as a starting point for those discussions, whether it's by doing something simple like writing acknowledgements of countries, or researching more about the land that you're on and who it originally belonged to, or whether it's learning words from the local language, all those different small steps of taking action come from that provoking emotional moment of understanding what it was that actually happened and continues to happen as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to use that emotion and that understanding and empathy that they initially feel when they learn of these atrocities, and then turning that into a path of action for them as well, because I think that might give them some agency and some direction for how to move forward and take those steps. You've both mentioned acknowledgements of country, and that is something that's really important. I just want to mention here that we do have a blog on our website of how to write an acknowledgement of country with your class, and I just think that that's such an important thing to do with your students. So we'll also link that in the webinar notes as well, so teachers can go and take a look at that, because that might be a nice first step for you to take with the other ones that the guests have spoken about. Now to you, Tramain, how do you, so with your context, and you teach all First Nations students, how do you approach the idea of reconciliation? Do they have, by grade 4, you've got grade 2. You've got the grade 2s, Caitlyn. Yeah, so grade 2, so they're quite young, and we know as teachers we differentiate our learning and we modify things for levels of understanding.
Yeah.
At grade 2 level, what are they coming to you with already, and what are you using as tools to help explain to them what it's like being an Australian and also being an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander Australian in 2021?
Yeah, so my kids come to me, they have, the prep teacher at our school is Torres Strait Islander, the year 1 teacher is also a Maori woman, so they come to me with a very strong understanding of reconciliation already, so I'm very lucky. They also come to me with home experiences of knowing already that there is a broken relationship between white Australia and Aboriginal people. They know that by the time they get to me. So I guess our job is to really hone in that reconciliation. Although it's this big word, all it really means is coming together to heal. So we're trying to improve the relationship between Aboriginal people and Western Australia, like Western society in Australia. So it's a pretty easy concept to explain to my kids in year 2 because they already have the base knowledge of Sorry Day by the time they get to Reconciliation Week, but they also know about like forced colonisation from January 26th. So that stuff all happens before Reconciliation Week, which is nice. Not nice, but it's nice that they have that pre-knowledge going into Reconciliation
And
Week.
for a teacher, it kind of paves that way in a
Scaffolds
more
it
gentle
great.
way.
Yeah. So by the time we get to Reconciliation Week, we're actually talking about things that we can do to move forward and ways that we can heal our relationships with non-Indigenous Australians, but also within our culture, ways that we can heal as a people. I did a really great thing with my preps to year 2s this year that I didn't mention on anything because it was really specific to us as a school. So the year 1 teacher was like, what can we do? Because we try to make it so authentic all the time that sometimes there's like that forced pressure that it has to be this next level. And I said, well, what do we usually do as a people when, you know, this kind of stuff happens? And she said, you know, we march from Parliament to Musgrave and we show that's how we take action. So our kids made signs and we talked about how like Murrays can do better for our own culture. And we talked about caring for country and looking after each other and caring for community. And we went on a little march around our school and we got to chant and all the other classes come out and watch. Our admin came out and were clapping for us. And I think the kids knew, like their little signs proved that they knew that it was about healing for us as a people. So I think they come with that knowledge by year 2, especially that this is a healing process.
Yeah.
So
had any of them actually attended the march?
Yeah. So that's a real awkward thing for myself and other staff of my school is we obviously attend these marches. Yeah. And it's great to see the kids there, but it's also like, oh my God, they're students. A lot of them go with their families. They have since they were born. Right. So they know, a lot of them, that this is how we take action as a people, and they love it. They think it's, you know, the best thing ever that they get to.
That's so fantastic that you adapted that for those of them who were at school that day as well. Because so important, and it sounds like they have a really strong identity, and that you guys are fostering amazing kind of little people that are going to grow into really fantastic adults with strong voices, which is amazing. So well done to both of you for that. I love that. Did you take any photos of the march?
I did. And I sent them to Jordan through Learning to Nanga. I just said, oh my God, look at this, because obviously I can't share them online, but I was just like, it was amazing. Like,
Did Jordan love
them? She loved them.
Yeah. Amazing. So great. Thank you so much for sharing about both of your experiences with that, because it can be, I think for teachers, one of the challenges with any part of teaching is delivering information in a way that's appropriate but also is authentic and honest, and there's some things that just need to be said and not avoided, but I really love the way you phrased how you teach your children. Could you just say that again for me again? It was about healing together. Yeah,
so healing together and healing us as a people. So obviously we have a lot of specialists in our school, like speech pathologists and OTs, and they're non-Indigenous. So the kids know that there's people in our own community, even though their teacher's Aboriginal, their families are Aboriginal, there's people within their own community that are here to help that process as well, that are non-Indigenous. So when you explain it as the people around you, they know that these people are here to help.
Fantastic.
And I think that's healing that relationship a bit better too. So
definitely, for sure. So as we mentioned earlier, there is this cross-curricular priority of the national curriculum. It's one of 3. What are the barriers? Because this is such an important thing, and we do want to get it right, but I think we also have to just make a start, and that's the most important thing. That's the messaging I'm getting from both of you, is just to make a start and take steps. But some people will say that they have some barriers on effectively educating to reconciliation. I'm thinking like they might be under-resourced, they might not know where to start looking. Like you said before, Caitlyn, they might have unconscious bias, or they might be still on their learning journey themselves. And how can we as members of this education community together better support our teachers to prioritise this learning? What would you like to say to teachers to inspire them to really make this a true priority in their classroom?
I think the real sadness is not doing anything at all. So anything that you do, any place that you start is already so much more beneficial to where you were before, whether that's starting by just writing a class acknowledgement of country, whether that's starting by diversifying your bookshelf in your classroom, whether it's by just reading up on articles yourself, educating yourself first, whether it's by, following people on social media who do educate and speak out a lot about culture, history, and these kind of social issues in our country. Any of those things it's a very simple, very easy place to start. Some other things, I guess, fears that people might have is that they might say the wrong thing, or they might not do it the right way. But this Australians Together PD that I went to last year, he said there is no right way if you're trying to teach it. You will make mistakes, absolutely, but it's making mistakes in trying to teach it is far better than staying silent, because we've been silent for too long, and we just can't continue to be silent about it. So I think just taking that step of faith, as educators, we're risk takers anyway. We like to refine our teaching. We like to try new things. So that's taking that fear out of it and just overcoming it and getting started. I think I always say to my teaching colleagues like how grateful I am for the Instagram community, because there's just so much information there at your fingertips, and so being a part of spaces like that, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, or even just the places where you get your news from, making sure that you are listening to diverse perspectives, and finding resources from First Nations creators primarily. Other places are helpful for information and for resources, but making sure that you're finding accurate and relevant information, especially for things like Sorry Day, Reconciliation Week. There's so many First Nations creators and educators who have made resources for us to use. My preference is to always go to them first, and then other places if I can't find what I need. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, and I wholeheartedly agree. And thank you so much, because from what I'm getting, your openness is the main thing.
Absolutely.
And the first place to start. And thank you for sharing so openly today yourself, Caitlyn. What barriers have you heard of other teachers maybe in your online communications, Tramain, or just in life in general with colleagues? What do people say are their barriers or their, restrictions on teachers?
I think from online in particular, the people that are messaging me, asking me questions, they don't directly say it, but I think they're scared to approach the Aboriginal community in their own community, face to face kind of, or even picking up the phone. I always say to them, like, I am not an expert, but I know the area that I live on and I know my own people, but I don't know what's happening in Orange in New South Wales. Like, I don't know the Aboriginal people from that area or their cultures. So you really do have to go to them, and your school should be making it a priority, especially in this particular teacher's instance. She had a lot of Aboriginal children in her classroom. I said, like, your school needs to be making that a priority. And I think it obviously does come to teachers because they're the ones facing the children every day to be doing that extra work, but I think a lot of admin in a lot of school could be doing a lot better for their teachers, so they don't have that fear of having to approach communities themselves.
Exactly.
Because
and
it's
a bit
new.
of pressure too.
Yeah, it's new. It's like, if you haven't grown up in those communities and you don't know them, like, I wouldn't just go and approach strangers on the street and be like, teach me how to do this, because you don't know the reception you're going to get. But I think admin need to start forging those kind of relationships of communities for their staff and for their students, because it's definitely a missing link in a lot of chains, I think.
Yeah, actually that's really well put as well. It's got to be a collective effort on behalf of the whole school community.
Whole school,
yeah. Okay.
I think even like providing PD as well, like that should be school leadership's responsibility to provide this PD to teachers. We can find it ourselves, but that's not, I personally don't feel like that's our responsibility to source that, especially if you want your whole school to be on the same path and the same kind of track for incorporating these things. It should be coming from leadership. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. So when we talk about PD, and you've done some great PD recently, Caitlyn, that you mentioned before, maybe this is the answer to this question. What is the best PD you've ever done with regard to embedding First Nations perspectives in your classroom?
I've used Australians Together for 2 different PDs over the last 12 months. I teach at a Lutheran college, and so incorporating the faith-based side of reconciliation as well as Indigenous perspectives. And both of their PDs have been hugely transformative in my understanding and my confidence as a teacher. And their website has so many free videos, free articles, all just so informative. So that would be my first place to go to. My first place is probably Instagram. I feel like there's so much teaching there and so much education there for free. But yeah, Australians Together would be my biggest recommendation.
Brilliant, thank you. And yours?
So I have surprisingly never done a specific PD on how to embed First Nations perspectives outside of what I'm taught, obviously in my school from my colleagues.
Yep.
So we're super lucky to have First Nations teachers and AEOs on our school staff who always share their ideas and perspectives. But I've heard really good stuff about Wangaru, and I'm trying to get my school to do a school-based PD with Leslie from Wangaru, because I think she is just, like, even on Instagram, gives out so much for free that really deserves to be recognised, I think. Like,
Absolutely.
she is just a Wonder Woman. And
we
the stuff
love
that
Leslie.
she puts out is just amazing.
Yeah,
and
incredible.
As a First Nations person, she has taught me so much. So, yeah, I always suggest people to just go to her Instagram if they don't know where to start, because she has so much on there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, well, we'll link both of those as well. Thank you so much for sharing those, because sometimes it's a bit hard to know where the best information comes from, and from hearing from other teachers is actually really helpful. So if another teacher shares, like you said, on Instagram, that I went to this PD, it was amazing, or, you know, like in a webinar, or you find out about a PD, it's kind of like it's come to you with a recommendation. That's a bit better. But yeah, really interesting that you were saying, Tramain, that you haven't done any formal like sit down PD, but I can imagine you've done a lot of PD in the way of learning, communicating, absorbing from people around you. So PD doesn't have to be structured either. So. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about social media, just to wrap up, because that's our favourite. No. You guys are both amazing voices on social media and doing such a great job in that space of being inspiring educators. And so I was wondering from you, who are some of the teachers that you're following that you are inspired by, and who are really great voices in the space of talking about First Nations Australia?
I wrote a whole list.
Oh, I wonder if you'll have any matches.
There's so many. We probably have like lots of double ups. Tramain is obviously on my list, top with Jordan from Learning Tinyana. Yep. I think Rhiannon from Outback Teacher, and also Caitlyn from She Moved from the City. Yep. Neither of them identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, but they have lived and worked in communities, which means that their experience of culture and community is it's real. It's not just, you know, in their mind. Hannah from Teaching in Solidarity is a real truth speaker and shares sometimes the maybe not so pretty side of incorporating these perspectives in our teaching. Wangaru, Teaching with Tanner, Miss Gibbs. There's heaps more. Have you got any more, Tramain?
You've literally taken almost my whole list. I was going to say Teaching with Tanner is fantastic, because I think in Instagram, secondary school teachers aren't as big, and she puts out not only really awesome resources, but she also talks a lot about what she does in the high school setting, which is obviously very different to what we're doing in primary. In the same context, Lisa from Teaching Ninny Ones is
Yeah.
great for early childhood because she does so much. She identifies as Noongar, so she's Aboriginal, and she just makes beautiful little what are they called when you set up learning in like early childhood?
Oh, like stations?
Yeah, little stations in her classroom.
Like exploration.
Yeah, little exploration
Yeah.
stations.
Nice.
And they're teaching concepts that are obviously way above that age level in a way that's really hands-on, and that they can grasp the very beginning steps of that concept, which is just awesome. Like, she always inspires me to do little play things in my classroom.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, because all kids of all ages enjoy play, and year two's still quite little too.
babies still.
Yeah. Oh, well, I just wanted to thank you both so much for appearing on this webinar with me, because you've just given such insightful views and backgrounds and information for us to go away and think about. So thank you to Caitlyn. Thank you so much. And thank you to Tramain. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
It's been so good. Yeah, thanks, Tramain. So many good ideas already.
Good on you. Thank you, guys. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.